Good evening. Welcome to the Boulder Valley School District Board Candidates Forum, sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Boulder County. The League is a nonpartisan organization which neither supports nor opposes political parties or candidates. We bring this forum to you as a public service. I'm Louisa Young, your moderator. And let me give the audience some of the ground rules to which the candidates have already agreed in advance. Written questions will be accepted from the audience, and our screeners will prevent duplication. I will read a question, and then each candidate will have 1 minute to respond. Our timers are strict, and we'll let the candidates know when there are 15 seconds left before the stop card. Each candidate may give a 2-minute opening statement and a 1-minute closing statement. There are 4 district seats open for this election on November 3rd. District D and G candidates are unopposed, so they were not invited to participate tonight. Each candidate must be a resident of the district which they represent. However, all candidates are voted upon district-wide. All electronic devices must be turned off. We recommend that you silence your pagers and cell phones. Channel 22 is the only authorized TV coverage. Neither the candidates nor their staff may record the forum. It is web streamed, and channel BV22 can be viewed at any time on any device. Excerpts may not be used in any candidate's campaign, and candidates may link to the web streaming media from their campaign website, but they cannot place the video on their website. So with that, we will begin. District A has 2 candidates, Shelley Benford and Denny McCloskey. And District C has 3 candidates, Chris Barge, Susan Femmer, and Kathy Gebhardt. So we will begin with Shelley Benford. You may make your opening statement.
Okay, thank you. So when I ran for the board 4 years ago, I did it because I was really passionate about education and really cared. And I don't think that I fully realized what a huge responsibility being a school board member is. I now understand that. In BVSD, we have a budget that is bigger than the city of Boulder's budget. We are the 2nd largest employer in Boulder Valley. We have as many, if not more, students than CU. And every year we turn out thousands of students who will become the fabric of our community. They are our doctors, our lawyers, our accountants, our mechanics, our hairstylists, and we're going to rely on these students before we know it. So I feel as if we have a tremendous responsibility with a budget that big and for turning out kids that have the skills they need to be successful. And it's especially a big responsibility because 75% of people don't have kids in our schools. So they're not highly invested, or they don't know a lot about the issues. So that means that they're trusting us to pay attention. And I feel like we need to bring our best skills and background and experience to this job because of that trust. And, I feel fortunate because for many, many years I've worked with large, complex organizations doing strategic planning, financial planning, and organizational consulting. And that combined with the 4 years now that I've had on the board, I think gives me the base of experience that is needed for this job. And I hope that you'll all agree that that experience will prove to be an asset for the next 4 years. So thank you.
Now we'll hear from Denny McCloskey.
Yes, thank you for taking some time tonight to listen to your candidates for this coming election, November 3rd. I think that I bring a unique perspective to this race from the standpoint of spending over 3 decades in the classroom, seeing day to day what are the issues that confront our kids. And I think that's the center of why we are going to operate as a board, how we allocate funds, what choices we endorse moving forward make all the difference. It starts right at the very beginning. Parents are the students' first leaders, the first teachers. If they don't get off to a good start, any problems that they have merely multiply. It is key that between the preschool and third grade that we get as many kids as possible up to grade level, up to speed. That's not only is it sense fiscally, as my opponent Michelle Benford said, it's also something that costs us more every year. Beyond that, if we don't have students that graduate, not only going into the careers we talked about, they become those that are in our detention systems. That becomes $25,000 a year besides the wasted human capital. That continues on. So decisions that we make should be focused on what we do for the students, not necessarily just concerned about preserving organization. And that should be driving every thought that we had as far as policy making. I have experience as an elected official in large budgets, hiring and firing and understanding how to evaluate on an annual basis in a positive way for both city managers, county administrators, the city attorney, county attorney, and also deciding on how those budgets would be allocated. To that end, I would also lobby not only at the local level with my own community, but at the state and national level. I ask for your vote.
Thank you. And now we'll move on to Chris Barge.
Hi, thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum, and thank you for everyone coming tonight. I recognize that we've got really three great people running for school board in District C. I'm really admiring of Susan Femmer as an educator, and I admire Kathy Gebhardt's leadership in initiating lawsuits that expanded funding at the state level for schools. You know, we have a lot in common. I'm married to a BVSD teacher of 15 years, and I've been a strong supporter of expanding funding for K-12 education right here in Boulder Valley. For my part, I've been very, very active over the last 7 years right here in the Boulder Valley School District. I was the one that helped us win the mill levy that has doubled preschool and full-day kindergarten for at-risk kids. I've put hundreds of hours into our strategic planning, and I'm really happy with the plans we have on paper now. And I want to implement those as your board member. So I would say that out of all the candidates, with all due respect, I'm the one that has the passion and energy to hit the ground running and make a real impact right away. You know, my priorities on the board will be focusing on equity, excellence, and engagement. But I want to close by telling you really why I'm involved here. It has to do with the stories of two kids. One was our firstborn almost 8 years ago. We realized what an awesome responsibility we had to ensure success for our own child. The other is an infant that I got the opportunity to hold just last week, the seventh and youngest child of one of our Latino parents. I founded a program that's involved in Latino parent engagement. As I held Allison Cordoza, I realized the awesome responsibility that we have to ensure success for all children. That's the work that I'm involved in at the grassroots level every day. I work with stakeholders across our county, and I ask for your vote.
Thank you. And now let's hear from Susan Femmer.
Once again, thank you. I have recently retired from Boulder Valley School District. I started in '92 when my kids went into school. If you got my kids, you got me. It kind of went that way. I have worked with kids, however, since the 60s when I starting in college, and then was a juvenile probation officer. Dealing with abuse and neglect as well as those that are being adjudicated. I do have a sheet out in the front hall, or in the hall there, that kind of talks about my background, so I'm going to leave it to that. You're going to hear a lot of words talking about goals and ideas and things like opportunity gaps, equity gaps. What we need to remember that, yes, plans on paper are great, but somebody has to implement them. The school district is not just teachers and administrators. You have bus drivers, you have office staff, you have the kitchen staff, paras. They're the ones that need to be thought about too. I think that anytime we can come up with great plans, and it's wonderful, but we need to think down the road on how they're going to be implemented, what consequences, if any, are, and how we can meet those in advance. We are the advocates for the schools and for our students, and that means we need to keep them safe. This district covers hundreds of miles. It's not just one community. You go from the mountains, you have downtown Boulder, you have Lafayette, Louisville.
Thank you. And finally, we'll hear from Kathy Gebhardt.
Again, I want to extend my thanks along with the rest of the candidates up here to the league and to the members of the audience. And I see several school board members, sitting school board members, and I see some staff, including Dr. Messenger, and I want to thank all of them for all of the hard work they've done in making this school district an excellent place, and thank them for attending tonight. I believe that a strong, vibrant public education system is central to our democracy and is critical to our local community and to our local citizens as well as to our state. I want to be part of making sure that BVSD's future is bright and that every student has an opportunity to be the best that they can be. BVSD is an excellent system, but we can and we must do better. I want to highlight my decades-long experience as a parent in BVSD. I have been a parent for over 25 years, still counting. I have a 31-year-old, and it goes all the way down to a 13-year-old. I have spent countless hours volunteering in the classroom. I have worked on numerous district-level committees. I've worked on numerous school-level committees, and I've worked at the state level. Over the years, I've been a parent very grateful for the teachers that have worked hard with my children, but I've also learned that there are very many frustrations in the school district's ability to meet all of the needs of every child. And so, yes, I have fought tirelessly as a public interest attorney for better funding, and I understand that better funding is an important issue, but it's not the only issue, and I totally understand that that alone will not solve all of our problems, and it's because of that that I'm running for the board. I believe I will be a very strong member of the board. I know how to work on boards. I have a sympathetic ear, an open mind, and I ask for your vote and your support, and again, I thank you for being here tonight. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And now we're going to move into questions from the audience. And so that we don't have the same person speaking first and last, I'm going to mix you up a little bit. I think we'll start with Chris Barge for this first one and go this way. So the first question is, do you have a position on Common Core?
Yes, thank you. Common Core refers to the standardization of the learning requirements nationwide that has been a big push over the last few years. And it has made its way down to BVSD as well. It lands and makes the biggest impact here when it comes to testing. And I think that assessments is something that you'll see me take leadership on this board. We need to make sure that we are not getting in the way of learning. So while I appreciate the spirit of high standards for our whole nation, I do think that we need to be careful that the assessments we're doing are not interfering with learning, that they are streamlined, that they are pared back, and also that they are developed as much as possible at the local teacher, school, principal level. We need to be really listening to our community and what is good for learning.
Thank you. Susan Femmer.
The concept when it came out a number of years ago was probably, some frustration going on, what's going to happen with our kids. Having been an intensive special ed paraeducator now for a long time, in one classroom you have kids that go from being very needy, perhaps I'm talking middle school level, from very low special ed up to kids that are already taking high school classes. You can't homogenize. So I have had difficulties with Common Core for that reason. It's like we can't be a cookie cutter for every kid that comes out. Everyone's different. They're going to be able to do different things. Not everyone's going to college. Not everyone's, the same as the kid next to them.
Thank you. Kathy Gebhardt.
Well, Common Core, we should probably have a common understanding of what it means. It's limited to language arts and to mathematics, and it's separate and apart from the testing. I too share Chris's concerns about testing, which is why I've worked very strongly with the state and at the school district. I was on the assessment subcommittee of the strategic plan to make sure that our testing is appropriate and formative and actually helps inform instruction. But as far as the Common Core itself goes, I think what we need to make sure is that we have the resources and the ability to make sure that we implement it, that the teachers are supported in implementing that, and that the community has support and buy-in, because we are a local control state and a local control district, and we need to make sure that our curriculum and our values reflect that of our community.
Thank you. Shelley Benford.
I have concerns about the Common Core for a number of reasons, but the main one is that I think it reflects a trend towards just standardization of everything. We have standardized curriculum now that brought to us by the Common Core. We have standardized testing. We even have standardized food in our country, and it feels to me like we're more and more treating our kids like data points, instead of like individuals. And they're not data points. They're not test scores. They're individuals who have different talents and different passions and different abilities, and I feel like the Common Core doesn't address those at all. So I'm not a fan of the Common Core. So.
Okay. And Dennis McCloskey.
Yeah, fair enough. I think that Common Core is a most recent iteration of something I think that I noticed as an educator that we called A Nation at Risk in '83. We really felt that our students were not being held to some competitive standard worldwide. And it was an idea, it wasn't necessarily a fact. Even at that time, there were great districts doing wonderfully without the implementation of such a program. But since '83, there's been several iterations just like that. So I think that we have to think about what the purpose is. If you actually do it, not only you have to afford doing it, not only the time, but you have to have the data back in the teacher's hands for the student to actually use it. Finding out next year for a student you don't have again is worthless. And that happened over and over again through multiple iterations. I don't have a lot of hope that Common Cores can be any different. Many kids are tested over and over again. They already have examples of that success. We should be able to waive that.
Thank you. So with our next question, we'll start with Susan Femmer and go around this way. And the question is, how can Boulder Valley School District improve school disciplinary processes while keeping kids in school engaged and safe?
The discipline end of things, I think, is an ongoing process. Everybody has to be a part of it that is not only in the school, but also with the parents. I know I've worked hard, trying to catch things as they happen, and then you get, perhaps a parent that says, well, that's just my kid being a kid, and someone ends up being hurt. It needs to be supported and backed up. If a teacher does send someone that's having a discipline issue, they can't just be turned around and sent back to the classroom, and I've seen that happen. But everybody needs to be involved with it. Anybody in that school and in that home needs to be involved with it and say, hey, no.
Thank you. Kathy Gebhardt?
I'd like to answer that question from what I think the board should be doing, since we're here to run for a board spot. And I believe that what we need to make sure is that we have the right policies and procedures in place to address discipline issues as they arise at the school level. I do agree that it is a community issue and that we have an obligation to make sure that there are procedures in place at every level to make sure that kids, when they run into discipline problems, that first of all, they're not some type of manifestation of a special needs issue, or that there are other reasons that we need to address to solve those discipline issues. But most of all, because I've seen it happen over and over again, those kids need to stay in school, because as soon as we send them out of school, that becomes more and more difficult for them to catch up and to return to school. So the policies need to make sure that our students are staying in school and that they're safe in school and that everyone is safe in school.
Thank you. Shelley Benford?
Yeah, I think that BVSD does a very good job of disciplining students in this district. And I say that because as somebody who's sat on the board for the past 4 years, when we hear complaints, they move up through the system, and people are pretty vocal about those complaints. And we don't hear very many about school discipline. In fact, I can't even think of one for the past several years that we've heard. So that tells me that the district is doing a good job with that. And I agree with the district that school discipline should be handled at the school level. It makes me really nervous when we elevate that to the criminal justice system, because I feel like kids should be allowed to make mistakes and not have it on their records for the rest of their lives. So I really support BVSD's approach to school discipline.
Denny McCloskey?
I think school discipline is a huge issue, but it's what you allow you endorse. If you don't deal with an issue at the initial steps, you allow things to grow. And that after 30-some years in the classroom watching what happens, that's really at the root of it. If a teacher is allowed the range to deal with the issues in the classroom, and the building leadership, however that building is structured, is allowed to have some flexibility in what happens depending on a single event, I think you have what we see now in BVSD. And that is, you don't see much bubbling up, because we are empowering our staff and our building leaders to deal with it in a more rational way. And I would hope that would continue.
Thank you. And Chris Barge?
This points to a reason why we need people leading on our school board that can match the talent that we find in our teachers who work every day at the grassroots level in the classroom. School discipline is not just a headline. It's a relationship. It manifests when you have discipline troubles from a whole range of things that I'm happy to see the school district really embracing. When you talk about our focus on parent engagement, it starts at home. When you talk about our focus on professional development, this is helping to give teachers more and more tools that they'll need to de-escalate situations. Just this week, my wife has a colleague dealing with a very concerning discipline problem with an elementary school student. It's disrupting learning right now. We have to have the support for our teachers, and we have to have understanding at all levels of our administration, including the board, of just what it takes in order to support the whole child in their social emotional development.
Thank you. This time we'll start with Kathy Gebhardt. And the next question is, should each neighborhood school provide preschool and kindergarten classes? What age should schooling begin?
Well, the answer to that question is yes, of course, every school should offer preschool and full-day kindergarten. The question is at what cost to the rest of the services and resources in the district. The research is undisputed that quality early childhood and quality all-day kindergarten is the best tool for making sure that we close opportunity and achievement gaps down as kids continue to proceed through the system. So of course I support that. The question is, how do we pay for it? And I would work tirelessly to try and find ways, innovative ways, because as a district we're no longer able to ask for additional support. I would tirelessly look for ways to do that. And I believe that we need to partner so that we cover the birth to 5 year, but I think for starting at 3-year-olds, the district could be able to start providing preschool in their neighborhood schools so that parents don't have to travel and can take their kids to the nearest and best and highest quality provider.
Thank you. Shelley Benford?
The issue of preschool is an interesting one. It's very expensive, and so it's helpful if you have a broad perspective on and how to pay for it. I agree with Kathy that when people are very gung ho about preschool and full day K, and I think there are good reasons for that. But then when their kids get to high school and they need to take AP Calc and there aren't enough sections because we spent all our money in preschool, then they start to wonder if maybe that was a good idea. So I feel like we need to balance our approach to education across all the grades. I also think that the research about preschool isn't as clear as people make it out to be. The fact is that preschool and full day K tend to benefit minority and disadvantaged kids primarily. And there's only a lasting benefit if those children are supported throughout their years in the district. So I feel like if we don't want to waste our money on early childhood education, we need to support those kids throughout the district, throughout the years that they're in the district.
Thank you.
Well,
Jenny McCloskey?
In my opening statement, I already addressed this, the standpoint that every issue that comes up from P through 3 only becomes a multiplier and it becomes an exponential problem for the student. And that's why it's so important. We should be able to offer it at every site. And I know we have combined schools. It doesn't have a separate building, so to speak. So we have combined programs. We need to have the flexibility to offer it, not necessarily demand it. And I think that's one approach that we might consider. The other one is to realize that there's never going to be enough money for everything that we think is valuable in this district or any district. And we must use our partners in the community. It'd be volunteers and other organizations that are public and private to fill those needs. It's not always just the school district. As a matter of fact, it might even be healthy that it isn't just the school district that does it.
Okay. And Chris Barge.
Yes, thank you for this question. It's very important and central to work that I've done in our community for 7 years. As I mentioned, I helped the district double its preschool and full-day kindergarten options. But, you know, we still have full-day kindergarten only offered to 33% of our students here in Boulder Valley compared to a state average of 70%. We need to at least get to the state average. I advocate for full 100% access to preschool and full-day kindergarten for those families who want to enroll their children. I serve on the Boulder Valley Early Childhood Advisory Committee, and we also are beginning work on a feasibility study to look at where we really need to strategically place new opportunities for access to preschool. You know, the thing about this is that you've got an opportunity here to put a person on the school board in me who works every day on this issue and who understands that sometimes it's about plugging the parents in who don't have access to it. I'm able to do that without even expanding the
your time
resources
is
we
up.
spend.
Okay. Susan Femmer?
I really like, the concept with preschool and, full-day kindergarten. The question I raise is, it's great if you're in town here. It's great if you're in Broomfield, Louisville, Lafayette. You have elementary school, an elementary school whose attendance area is 240 square miles. How are you going to deal with that? They have the same right to the same opportunity for that pre-education that you're going to have. Do you have school buses? Again, we're getting into the dollar end of it, but if you're going to have it here, you need to have it here. And that's where it needs to be figured out.
Thank you. So with my next question, I'm going to start with Jenny McCloskey, and we're going to go this way. Okay?
All right.
So the question is, what would you do for at-risk students? Would you be willing to devote funds for after-school programming like I Have a Dream?
I Have a Dream is probably one of the more well-known organizations that does deal with this. I have a nephew that benefited tremendously from that program. And through his high school years dealing with chemo treatment and issues that came up around that, was an eye-opener to me how well that worked. Almost every high school that I've worked in has tried to figure out at least one method of getting a section or two and a willing instructor to deal with what we call at-risk students. And really it is people that have not gotten the attention for lots of different reasons. It could be they're not all the same reason. So you have to have somebody in charge that has that ability to deal with a wide range. You may only have 9 students, and that's one of the biggest complaints that come up, is that the low numbers that a single instructor might have compared to 30 in another class is a problem. However, the range that's being asked for demands it.
Thank you. Susan Femmer. I'm sorry. I'm going the wrong direction here after I told you that. Now, Shelley Benford.
The district has supported the I Have a Dream Foundation, and I support it as well. So I would continue to support that over the next 4 years. I do think that the best way, though, to benefit at-risk kids is lower class sizes. And there's actually a lot of evidence that that's true. Minority and disadvantaged kids receive the absolute most benefit from lower class sizes. In fact, the research shows that 4 consecutive years of small class sizes will double the graduation rate for those students. So I think instead of talking about class size as if it's too expensive or too inefficient or some of the other things that are said about it, we need to start thinking about it as quite possibly the most cost-effective thing that we could do for our at-risk students.
Thank you. Kathy Gebhardt.
Thank you for that question. I think that solving the issues around at-risk students is one of the issues that I've worked on tirelessly over my whole career, and it brings in everything we just talked about with preschool, which is how do we allocate our resources to serve our most at-risk and our highest needs kids. I think that, as Shelley pointed out, we need to make sure our resources are allocated all the way along for every child in the system to make sure they get the education that they're entitled to. I agree that lower class sizes is a really important step, as is more and better learning time, as is perhaps wraparound services in some of the schools that we have. All of this rolls around to the question of funding priorities and finding additional resources for those children, but also working within our community to make sure that we provide the kinds of services and supports that those children need.
Thank you. And now Susan Femmer.
I've worked a lot over the years with at-risk students, some that have been in the court system. What I've seen that seems to has really helped is when communities come together and put together after-school programs. Doesn't necessarily have to be in the school itself. There's a Chinook West. The whole community came together, built the building, put the staff in there, and kids go there after school. We also work very hard that our goal has been 90% of our students do some kind of extracurricular activity. Getting them involved, getting them seeing that there's something beyond themselves really has had a big impact, I know, at our end.
Thank you. So my next question could be oh, I'm sorry. Go right ahead. Chris Barge.
Thank you for the opportunity to address what I think is the most important question that's been asked tonight. This is the centerpiece of why I'm running. It is about making sure that really for the first time in BVSD, we're able to close this achievement gap that has eluded us for decades. I appreciate that others who are running for this office have had decades of experience engaged with BVSD. I'm frustrated, frankly, that our achievement gap has remained wider than anywhere in the state during these decades. I absolutely support I Have a Dream Foundation. I'll be at their luncheon very soon. And, their model is important. I was at a meeting earlier today where we're trying to expand that model. It's called Dream Big. It's very exciting. We're working closely with Boulder Valley School District and other partners. The opportunities here are really, for the first time, to match our community's values for diversity and inclusion with outcomes that we have somehow not been able to achieve, yet other districts in the state have. I'm here to help do the job.
Thank you. Okay, so now our next question could be very quick, and we're going to start with Shelley Benford. Could be a yes or no, but I'll leave it up to you. Do you have a position on Boulder Valley School District Ballot Proposal 3A?
Yes.
And what is it?
That's the fiber optic.
Yes.
Yes. I believe that it's a good idea for the district to have the option of selling some of its fiber optic capacity. I believe when we polled the community, 60% of people agreed with us. The intent of doing that is to benefit our less privileged children who may not have access to internet, and also our mountain communities that have a more difficult time. So I agree with it. I think the one negative is that once it's sold, it's gone. And so I'm hoping as a board we'll talk more about how much of that capacity we want to sell, and also what we do with that money, whether it goes into the general fund or whether we earmark it for something else that we might want, like lower class sizes. So.
Thank you. Kathy Gebhardt.
Yes, I support Measure 3A. And I guess I get a few seconds to talk about why. I think that, again, it's really important to see the school district reaching out to the community when it has an opportunity to do so, and to provide a service that otherwise the community wouldn't receive, and to reach out to the communities that don't have the same access to the bandwidth as the mountain communities and the lower income communities is a really important outreach. And again, I think you have to trust that the board will make good decisions when that money comes in as part of the general fund, but that it could be targeted, again, to the most at need and the most at-risk population, so that we can start to try to provide some of those services in-house. So it seems like a very nice partnership between reaching out to the community, getting a little bit of resources back in, and working together to try to make sure that everybody's going to have the access to a 21st century education.
Thank you. Susan Femmer.
I support the, definitely the concept. Part of me would like to see our current access actually work on a regular basis before we look at selling some, to some other area. I know, the mountains, that'd be wonderful. We had to develop our own internet system. Line of sight with towers, which I can't believe I'm one of the tech people on. But before we get kind of down the road to where we won't have, perhaps everything, we need to make sure that what we've got is up and running on a regular basis, instead of, 3 times a day going down.
Thank you. Chris Barch.
Yes, I would support BVSD Measure 3A for fiber optic, mostly because I agree with the majority of those who've been polled that say they want more access to help level the playing field for students who don't have access. This is about connectivity, and while technology is one aspect of that, I want you to know that I'm in the community providing connectivity to the most hard-to-reach parents all hours of the day. So while technology connectivity is important, programs like El Paso, which I helped found, which engage Latino parents in advancing school outcomes, are really the hard work that we need to roll up our sleeves and do. We need to have people on the board who are in touch with all of the diverse communities that make Boulder Valley home. I bring that level of knowledge about parent engagement and community engagement, not just on an intellectual level, but because I've developed relationships with our agency partners and, frankly, with the parents who are hardest to reach.
Thank you. Denny McCloskey.
Yes, I support 3A for a number of reasons. And one is the accessibility to a community that has been marginalized. For that to happen makes a lot of difference. It is a huge burden for us to ignore what we have to decide to do once we sell it. We have to invest that wisely. We cannot do a one-time allocation. It has to be a very thoughtful step for us to take as a board. When we look at the dark fiber, how much ability that could get to a community, talked about mountain communities. I worked with county commissioners who thought they would never get the rescue ability because they couldn't be connected. And so I recognize what Susan was saying as being a huge challenge. And so it is a little bit different depending on where you live. But I think it's the right thing to do. It'd be disingenuous to tell the community that we don't want to have access, you'd have access to this ability to connect, but then on the other hand, ask you to reach out and use some of your programs to support the schools.
Thank you. I'm sorry, your time is up. So now this time I'm going to start with Susan Femmer, and we're going to go this way. And here's the question. What improvements do you want to see to make the schools a healthier environment for students and staff?
I think that probably comes from Casey. We have a responsibility to the safety, the health, the welfare of everybody that is in any school building. Number one, we need to listen. If someone is saying there's a problem here, we can't just ignore it and say, oh, it'll go away in a couple of weeks. It has to be acted on. We have good people that can go into schools that can check, whether it's ventilation or something like that. We need to have the healthy schools, and we need for people, if they see a problem, to feel that they can actually say something about it and that it'll be acted on.
Thank you. Kathy Gebhardt.
Well, the health and safety of our students and our staff is one of the highest priorities for a school board and for a school district. Clearly, we need to make sure that every day students go to school and every day the staff is working there, that they are working in a healthy and safe environment. Clearly, without that, you lose a lot of trust in the system. And so I think for the board, they need to make sure, as I've said, that we have the right people in place, the right superintendent in place, the right policies in place to make sure that all of those policies are implemented with fidelity, and that we are an open board to hear the concerns of our community and make sure that we have procedures in place to address those concerns when they arise, and to make sure that we address them soon, right as they arrive, so that we can address them quickly without them escalating into something that becomes front page news. Hopefully everything that, every issue that may come up, we would be able to address quickly and in a safe manner.
Thank you. Shelley Benford.
The incident at Casey was very enlightening for us on a lot of levels. We learned a lot about indoor air quality, more than we thought we would ever know. And we also learned a lot about communication. And I think that where we went wrong was declaring that school safe before we really knew it was, and while people were still experiencing symptoms and were ill. So I think that caused a lot of discontent and distrust in the community. And I don't think that needed to happen. I was one of the board members who advocated for more testing and for better communication with the parents. And I think that we're on that path now. So I think we've learned a lot from that situation. And I know in the new bond, we're going to be really paying attention to indoor air quality. So I think that we've made some good steps towards ensuring a healthier environment for students and teachers, but we learned the hard way. So.
Thank you. Denny McCloskey.
Thank you. I think that the air quality is going to be true for every building. One of the things you learn early on when you work in schools is that because of the financial issue, many of the structures are not built to a standard that we would all like to see. I think that's improved over time, but certainly in the 30-some years, I've worked in many buildings that have had issues. And most of it goes back to trying to save money or just trying to deal with the size that you needed to have. We had extended systems that no one else would approve. Those are the kinds of things that happen. In this case, I think what happened was it appeared that we were acting way too slowly, and it wasn't very clear that steps were being taken. And like you said, it becomes front page news. It's an opportunity to learn. And I think based on what I heard from the press and from listening into the network on the meetings, I think that this board learned an awful lot about how you should address that.
Okay. And Chris Barge.
Probably the biggest role for a school board member is to be a two-way conduit of information to the community and to the school district. I think that what happened at Casey last year was an example of a breakdown when it came to transparency and communication. I'd like to offer that my 10-year career in journalism prior to getting involved in nonprofit work tuned my ear to the common person, and interviewing people from all walks of life in our community for 10 years helped me get in touch with the sorts of things that come up. And so I pledge that I will be an effective communicator both to the community and to the school district. We're going to also have the largest bond in state history across all 58 schools in our district, including 4 new schools. Already at Southern Hills Middle School, there's been complaints by neighbors right on the property line about an air chilling system. I attended a community meeting because I care about the community.
Thank you. Stop. I've asked everybody, right? Okay. You have to keep track of me here. So this time I'm going to start with Kathy Gebhardt and just go this way. Here's the question. What do you think about the career tech programs at Arapahoe Ridge? Should it be expanded?
I am a huge fan of the career tech programs at Arapahoe Ridge. I happen to have a son who has some learning challenges, and for the first time in his life at Arapahoe Ridge, learning means something to him. All of a sudden, he's excited to go to school. He can see his career. He can see what he wants to do. And he's really excited that if he follows his path right now, which is in automotive, he might make more money than his 2 sisters who are teachers, and he likes to chuckle about that. I think the programs need to be expanded. I think the partnerships with Front Range Community College are a way. I think we've talked about expanding. We have some expansion possibilities with with St. Vrain. I've looked at career tech schools all over the state because I am very passionate about this as a possibility for many of our students. If you were to see Warren Tech down in Jefferson County, it's an outstanding, amazing facility, and they have a wait list of kids trying to get in there. So yes, career tech is something I'm very passionate about. I'm on the SAC and the DAC for that, and I'm all in on career tech.
All right, thank you. Susan Fimmer.
What she said. My son didn't go there, but I know many kids that do. They look forward to it every day. You know, they're leaving from Ned at 6 in the morning to get down there. They can't wait to get down there. I would like to see, definitely some expansion, maybe working more with the trades, because that is definitely an up-and-coming area for kids to be able to learn to get their licenses, become masters with community colleges. I think that is definitely one of the ways to go. Not everyone goes to college. They need an alternative.
Thank you. Chris Barge?
Thank you. One of the pillars of the strategic plan that's been so carefully crafted in close communication with a broad swath of the community is this idea that we need to create successful, curious, lifelong learners. I'm very supportive of that, and I understand that while college is something that does provide the baseline now for a successful career, we also have to be very concerned that a result of our achievement gap is that even though our graduation rates, we've done good progress on that, some of our students are limping across the graduation line. I mentor a student that's now at community college, and I'm very concerned about him right now. He was not prepared when he graduated from one of our high schools here in Boulder Valley. So I want to say that career tech is something that I'm going to be a strong advocate of and supporter of. But it gets back also to having board members that understand that we need to roll up our sleeves and do the hard work, do that engagement with parents from 0 all the way up through the time the kids are in their careers. Thanks.
Thank you. Danny McCloskey?
Yes, thank you. Voc Ed program in Boulder County years ago, and the array of industrial arts programs that existed in the 70s were vibrant and necessary for much of our community. And it was sad to see, not that they went away, but I know they went away for financial reasons. I understand that. But the concern was, what went with that was also the respect for the students. And many of those students, that was their pathway to learning. And to see that evaporate was crucial. I also spent 25 years coaching 3 different sports. And people learn differently in different ways, and they get your respect in different ways. for them to know that maybe my class was very difficult for them, and then to step out on the field and see that they were rewarded for great successes that they could perform. And they found out it was all about them. When I perform, things are wonderful. Now I can make that connection. I'm willing to try to do something differently in the classroom. This guy will help me. That makes a
Thank you.
difference.
Shelley Benford?
Yeah, I think Career Tech is a great program. When we talk about expanding it, that always means constraining something else. So I would need to know what those trade-offs would be. But I can say that I wish that more of our students had access to Career Tech. I know that my own children could not possibly have made it out here to take a class and then make it back to Boulder High School and fit that into their schedule. So I think we need to do a better job of scheduling and managing transportation so that more kids have access to that. And I would also like to see some more of that back in our schools, like it was when we were younger, where there was a shop in every school, or, some schools have some of that, but not all of them do. So I think that would increase access to those programs when kids can't get all the way down here to take classes.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm afraid we've reached the point where it's time for closing statements. We're not able to get to all the questions that came through, but we'll finish up now, and I think we'll go this way. We'll start with Kathy Gebhardt and finish up with Shelley.
Well, again, I extend my thanks to all of you for sitting through this and for the wonderful questions that you've submitted and for your passion and commitment in coming out and listening to the candidates and for your interest in a very exciting election. As I listen to the answers, I'm reminded of something that one of my mentors, Cal Frazier, who was one of the best commissioners of education we ever had, said, which is, it's amazing how much work you can get done when you don't care who takes credit for it. And while I think that you want to vote for me because I have lots of experience, I think of the MTSS system that we have for special ed, which is multiple tiers of system support. That's what I bring to this. I have a national perspective, I have a state perspective, I have a district perspective, I have a local perspective, and I have a parent perspective. Nobody else on this has that same kind of perspective. So because I'm passionate about everything I've done, I've devoted my entire life and my career to this, to public education, to making it a public good. I ask for your support, I ask for your vote, and I thank you for being here.
Thank you. Susan Femmer.
I agree. Thank you so much for sitting through all our discussions and so on. My background, being in the school district, also in the private sector. I'm going to throw in an MBA, which I happen to have at the same time. So finance is an area I think, look at pretty well. The main thing is no matter what school, in what community, each student should have the same access to an opportunity that they want to, for whatever they want to do. But if, you've got a youngster that, we can't have that class here, but you can drive an hour away and maybe get it, it's not okay. We need to have the equity across the system.
Thank you. Chris Barge.
Well, thank you for everyone who came out tonight, and thank you for those tuning in on TV. I want to close by telling you about what drives me. It's the values that my parents taught me. I was raised by a Methodist minister and a psychologist. In their retirement, they both went into nonprofit work. My dad, with reentry, helping prisoners in Georgia find a soft landing after they'd served their sentences. With my mom, she raced to Haiti after the earthquakes and began training first responders in how to help their communities be more resilient. What they both demonstrated to me was that when you see a problem and you realize you can do something about it, it is your responsibility to engage. I want to suggest to you that this election, the litmus test about who you should vote for should be who has the energy and passion to fully engage with this community. I want to be that person. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for coming out tonight, listening to our comments. A lot of it has been about ideas, but perhaps too little of it has been about the function of a board. And really tonight, what you need to think about also is that we're here to support a professional staff, a very large organization, and figure out that the policies make sense that are already in place. When we see that there's a flaw or something needs to be addressed, find a way to work together to get that corrected. And it doesn't matter whether it's a disciplinary issue or it's a budgetary issue, it's a topic, or it's how a bond gets rolled out. The board is not in the business of micromanaging what happens. They're in the business of setting policy and supporting staff that already exists, making sure that we don't have to continually retrain great staff because we lose them. One of the biggest gaps that we have right now, not only is it for the students, but as teachers, between the 7-year experience window and 25-year experience window, there's almost nothing. I ask for your vote to be that kind of a collaborative leader on this board.
Thank you. And Shelley Benford.
Yeah. Last Christmas, my nephew came to visit me, and I asked him what he was planning on doing. He was 18, and he said that he was going to go into the Marines. And I said, well, I didn't know you were interested in the Marines. And he said, well, I wanted to be an architect, but in 9th grade, I got lost in math. My class was huge, my school was huge, and I fell behind, and I never could catch up, and so I can't be an architect, and I didn't have any other options, so I'm going into the Marines. And, when he told me that story, it hit me so hard that we have such a responsibility to our kids so that we can give them what they need to reach their dreams. I don't want anybody leaving this district, any of our kids graduating and feeling like they can't do what they want to do because we failed them. So if I'm reelected, I want you to know that that's why class sizes is so important to me, and that's why supporting and attracting and retaining really excellent teachers is important to me, and also making sure our money is spent very wisely.
Thank you. On behalf of the League of Women Voters, I'd like to thank our candidates, the Boulder Valley School District and Boulder Valley Channel 22. And I want to encourage everyone in the audience to remember to vote.